Now then, now then, now then. Welcome to Department Talk Bollocks. Widely inaccurate, probably offensive, definitely pedestrian. Like Jimmy Savile, we'll fix it for you if you're looking for geeky conversation.
You actually used a Jimmy Savile quote so soon.
Yeah. Oh, damn! Shall we re-record it, guys? I'm the boyish, good-looking one, Phil.
I'm dancing with the devil in the pale moonlight.
I don't have any quote, but I'm Scott.
Yay.
So, it's been a while, guys, but like the chipmunks, we are back in style.
Mm-hmm. Down to sickness, mostly. coughing up various different colours of the rainbow.
Yeah, and once again, we've actually got something on tonight, so we're going to be bashing this one out super
Yay!
fast.
Oh, yeah, I like that one.
Hey!
Hey, I like bashing things out.
So we're going to be talking about Batman, and I just like to say, I'm Batman.
I'm Batman.
I'm Batman.
Actually, they all sounded the same, didn't they?
I'm Batman.
I'm not doing it again.
Okay. So we'll start off, as is customary, with when was the first time you were touched by the Dark Knight?
Oh, so who are we going first? Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. It was in the newspapers, strangely enough. Back in the 70s or the 80s, I can't remember, but they used to run the old Bob Kane cartoon strips in one of the newspapers. I'm pretty damn sure it was the Mail, because that was the only paper that my mum bought anyway. So it was the old Bob Kane comic strips. It was a little 3-panelled strip, and that was the very first introduction to Batman. And what followed afterwards really was the repeats of the 60s TV series, which is probably everybody's case here.
Yeah, because the Bob Kane Batman started in Detective Comics, but I believe that it was serialised in some new US newspapers after the fact.
And they just reprinted them all in the 80s in one of the newspapers. So
when Batman was still using a gun and just driving a normal car.
A normal black car.
Yeah.
It was actually good, though I must admit, the artwork in it was really amazing.
Yeah.
The ice cream van's going off outside, so we can now hear jingle bells while we're doing our little talk, which puts me off.
Jingle bells,
jingle
Batman
bell,
smells.
Batman smells, Robin flew away, So, the artwork was really amazing at the time, very dark, very noirish, a lot of use of shadows, and it was actually quite a good introduction, and that's why when the camp version came on the TV, it was a bit of a shock.
Right, because my first exposure to Batman was actually the 1960s Adam West series. So to me, that was Batman, and you're in quite a unique position because lots of people like Kevin Smith, the director Kevin Smith, like his first exposure to Batman was camp Batman. There are very few people that actually got exposed to dark of our age that got exposed to dark Batman first.
I would imagine Joel Schumacher got into the camp Batman as well, didn't he? Judging by one or two little things that we'll talk about later.
Scott, what about you?
It would be the Adam West Batman as well for me as well. But it was the TV movie where you had the ensemble of villains.
No, that wasn't. I'd just like to say, can you imagine how exciting this would be if you were a child in the 1967? It was actually a theatrical movie. It was released theatrically, and they originally were going to open it with, because in those days, a lot of the time they opened with a feature, and that would be the introduction to the series. They couldn't afford it, so they went, or something along those lines, so they ended up filming the first series first, and then in the gap between the first and second series they shot the movie and released it theatrically.
Holy bollocks.
So you would have actually got to see Adam West on the big screen.
Well, I never watched him on the big screen. I watched him on my poxy little TV.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't black and white. Unfortunately, I was born in the era of colour, but the TV movie was on my poxy little 14-inch monitor that was the home TV.
It took fucking ages for us to get a colour TV. My dad was a tight bastard over that. I mean, it was like one of them things that in the 70s, colour TV had come out in the 70s because obviously they'd filmed the first series of John Pertwee's Doctor Who in colour. And we had to watch it in black and white because my dad was a tight git.
That's poor.
Yeah, my mum kept saying to him, go down to Rumbelows and rent out, a colour TV because it's only an extra £2 a month or something like that. No, actually, no, it was probably £2 a year.
Well, I've got memories of watching, and I know I'm quite young, but I've got memories.
Well, you are only 2 years old, Phil.
Yeah, this is true. Well, I've got memories of watching Thunderbirds, Stingray, Captain Scarlet, the original Star Trek, all in black and white, because in our dining room we had an old black and white portable television, and invariably, as we've discussed before, I'm sorry if she ever hears this, she'll die of embarrassment. But once again, my mum, with the dominant,
always your mum,
watching soap.
First time I mentioned my dad in this,
on BBC Two, in that sort of 6 o'clock slot, there used to be a lot of sci-fi programming or what have you, cult programming.
Yeah, they did do a lot of that.
And I got banished to the dining room to watch it there. And I think also my grandma and granddad had a black and white TV in their bedroom, and sometimes I would go when the news was on or something. I'd go up there and watch TV. So I have actually got some memories of seeing.
They did repeat pretty much all of Jerry Anderson's stuff as well, didn't they, in the 90s?
They repeated all. Well, they repeated all the colour stuff. So they started with Stingray, which was his first colour puppet series. And what's really sad about that is Fireball XL5 would have totally fit into that, and I know I would have embraced it just as much as a child, but because it was in black and white.
And do you know what else is really sad? You look like Joe 90.
Thank you.
You never got a chance to watch that.
It's not the first time I've heard that.
I used to get that when I was a kid, don't worry about it. I used to have glasses, and my hair was lighter blonde, and I got called Joe 90.
So I'm going to plug myself into the big rat and program myself to be knowledgeable about Batman. Yeah. See, I brought it back. That's good. Yeah, that's the link. We're getting professional and shit.
We can't be doing with that. We can't do professional. We are totally amateur.
Yeah.
So stop doing that.
Oh well, we've changed it to pedestrian because one of our many listeners.
We've got one.
Sent me a text and said, "Dear God, it's amateur, not amateur. Because of my Stoke-on-Trent accent, and it goes right through. He's from Stoke-on-Trent as well, and he's got a little.
That rhymes with bent, Stoke-on-Trent, bent. That's what Anyway. Right, let's get back into Batman, shall we?
So, Batman. I'd just like to add, animated series. That's very kind of early in my Batman viewing experience, because I remember actually opening up Radio Times and seeing the. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the logo of Batman the Animated Series, which is essentially like Batman's silhouette with those two white pointed eyes, and he's got the cowl up over his shoulder, and he's like framed in red moonlight. And I remember seeing that picture in the Radio Times and being like, "Oh, what's that?" And I think What's Up Doc, which was like a Saturday morning program on ITV in the vein of Swap Shop, Tiswas, etc. But it was it was made by Warner Brothers, and they used it to show Warner Brothers programming. I think they showed classic '60s Batman in that for a while, and then when the animated series started, they started showing that, and I remember watching it, and then promptly switching off, loving it, and then a few weeks later being really scared of Two-Face and deciding that I would watch Live and Kicking again.
You'd watch Barbie's Farm instead.
Yes, this is true. Barbie's Funhouse, actually.
Yes. Oh, okay. I'm glad you know about that. Well, I must admit though, the animated series was actually quite strong in comparison to what had gone before it. I mean, all that had gone before it really was the Camp 60s TV series, and then it was quite a really strong, bold, serious, quite grown-up series. The characterizations were quite serious, and it really was for adults, for kids, if you know what I mean. And
I'm going to try and sort of hold back on the animated series, because if I wind myself up, I will just keep talking, and we won't get. I think that's like that. I could do an entire podcast just on the animated series.
I'll tell you what, you do the bonus one.
Yeah,
we'll sit back. We'll go to the kitchen or something, make ourselves a cup of tea, and you do a whole podcast on the animated Batman.
Yeah, just like they have like layers of grain on the picture, they didn't, they intentionally, when it was released on DVD, didn't clear it up. It had this very interesting way of doing it, where I believe eventually the animators, the Japanese animators, when they send it off to the studio for it to get animated in Japan, they eventually put a stop to it because they couldn't cope with it. But they would draw the cityscape onto black. So rather than being a white canvas, they would do it on charcoals onto a black page. They would paint onto black, and I think just something about the production. I think it was the Tim Burton movies that allowed them to do it, because while it doesn't really take its cues, it's very much its own thing, and probably owes more to the Max Fleischer's Superman cartoons. That meant that to children, Batman was dark, and this is how it had got to be, and for it to tie in, they were given this freedom which they wouldn't normally be given, and they were allowed to go very dark and use guns. Like, if you watch the 90s Spider-Man cartoon from the same period, I think there was one episode where I watched recently where the cops were chasing Spider-Man, and these normal New York police officers were carrying lasers. They went after it, and it was just...
that could have been one of those add-on processes that they do afterwards to do with, what the fuck do they call it? When they certifying them and editing them and trying to make it less dangerous for children to watch, and they could have added lasers on rather than, because they could have possibly originally intention were that they were guns firing bullets, and the laser thing was
possibly.
Probably something to do with that.
I've got a book on Batman the Animated Series, Batman Animated, which celebrated, I think, 10 years of it, and there's a page with all the notes they got back from the network and the censor and stuff, simple things like there was one episode that where Harley Quinn is taken for a ride in the Batmobile and she feels queasy or something, and you had to, there was a note sent back, make it clear that she only barfed on his cape, because she said something like, I think I messed up your cape or something, and she didn't piss on his cape or something. It's just little stuff like that, and certain things about you're only allowed sort of so many dams or something like that, or certain words would be changed, certain implications. The famous one, which actually made the episode better, was there's a two-parter called Robin's Reckoning, which flashes back to when his parents died, and rather than seeing them fall off the trapeze wire, because they get it cut by, not Joe Chill, I forget the gangster's name, I'm going to kick myself now, but it doesn't matter. They fall off this trapeze wire. They weren't allowed to show that, so they just showed Dick's reaction to it. And actually, yes, I said Dick. And they showed Richard.
Just Dick's reaction.
They showed Richard Grayson's reaction to it as they fall, and that's actually more effective. Just a close up on his face as he watched his parent, and you just see it reflected on his face. Yeah. The shadows of them falling off the wire.
Do you know what was quite interesting about the animated series is back in the day when the Warner Brothers shop was in Manchester, down now where Build-A-Bear is, unfortunately, they used to sell a lot of the cell animation from the Batman series in frames at the back of the shop, and they were all originals as well. They weren't copies or anything like that. They were all originals, but they were quite expensive. I do remember that the cheapest one was possibly about £40 or something like that. But they were quite interesting to see at that stage. The way that they went about drawing the series and animating the series.
I noticed at the IMAX in the print works by the door to screen one. I imagine it'll go soon when The Dark Knight Rises finishes playing. But they got some comic art, and they'd also got one with a selection of Catwoman, I think, from various animated shows. So
that's interesting.
Worth checking out if you're there. Right, so I think we should probably maybe go through the cinematic exploits of Batman, because I think that's what we're most familiar with.
Well, we know about the TV series as well. The campiness and the... I mean, to be absolutely honest with you, I do get rather bored of it these days. It's not the same as when I was a kid. When I was younger, and I used to enjoy watching it, and every episode ending with the same thing, where will Batman get out of this Deadly
Same
Trap,
bad time, same bad channel.
Yeah,
I watch it now, and I do watch it in the same way that I would sit down to watch a sitcom. You know, the same. It scratches the same itch for me, if you will, the same comedic itch. It's.
I just find some of it a bit. I know it was very camp and everything, but I just find some of it really cringy today. When it's like the scene at the start of one of the episodes where they're climbing up the building and they take a grate off the front of the window, and Robin's about to throw it down on the street, and Batman turns around to him and says, "No, think about the people below." Even though it was a fucking alleyway, it was an alleyway that nobody walks past and nobody walks into. Yet what he did is he got rubber hooks, suckered hooks, out of his pockets, stuck them to the wall, and hung the gate up, while making a moral point about how dangerous it would be to just drop it on the street below.
That's what I love about it. I love the puritanical view, like in the movie. They go into this bar which is full of sailors, yo yo, where the villains are all hiding out. I think it's on the dock and there's like boats moored to it.
Is this called the Blue Oyster Bar or something like that?
I can't remember.
So you've not seen Police Academy?
No, I haven't. and they go into they come out. They come out of the bar and Robin goes, "Gosh, Batman, what would make somebody turn to drink like that?" And it's like, well, Robin. Just because they're rum pots doesn't mean that they're not people too, and it's just and I just love that.
You should have called them seamen. That
really
kind of funnier.
That really kind of and also no moderation, no kind of like. No, like, well, you know, a drink in moderation is fine, Robin. No, he doesn't say that. He just says, you know, alcohol is bad. But even though we're not worthwhile humans because we drink, everybody deserves to live or something along those lines. But I actually think that there is. They definitely knew when they were making it that they were making it on several levels.
But I did hear a few stories about it in the past that you know the writers of it, even though they probably had it a little bit tongue in cheek, they really were trying to make the best, and they really were trying to make a serious series, like something that had a moral point and something that even though it was entertaining, they didn't quite see it as being camp.
Yeah,
as we see it now.
Yeah,
and even we saw it in the 80s as well.
Well, I think all the moral messages are actually fine. You know, they do.
Seatbelt, and you know, make sure you put your seatbelt on before we drive away.
For a children's audience, and I guess in a way that's what they do now. They just do it in a bit more. If you watch something like Batman the Brave and the Bold, which is currently on, they do it in a the same way, but they just make it more sophisticated.
I mean, we can't talk about the Batman TV series without mentioning Julie Newmar. Julie Newmar is one of the hottest women to ever wear a catsuit.
I'll take your Julie Newmar and raise you a Lee Merriweather. I prefer Lee Merriweather from the movie.
I still prefer Julie Newmar.
Scott, this is the point where you.
I'm staying out of this.
This is the point where you have to say, "Well, I prefer Eartha Kitt. She was just perfect." I
don't think anyone liked Eartha Kitt, to be honest with you. Bloody hell's fire. I think she ruined that last series of Batman.
Do you know what's really interesting is talking of like recasting. The most interesting one is. Frank Gorshin played the Riddler brilliantly.
Then it was the guy from Addams Family.
Yeah, but for one episode during the second season, I believe Frank Gorshin wasn't available, and they tried sort of getting him, and there was one episode where they'd written it for the Riddler, and because they couldn't get Frank Gorshin, they changed it to the Puzzler or something similar along those lines. And then I think they realised they weren't going to get him that series, so at the end of series 2, they brought in. The actor's name escapes me, but Gomez Adams.
John something, is it? John. Yeah, it was Gomez Adams from the Gomez series. Yeah.
And he plays it rather differently. It's a good. It just doesn't sort of mesh. But then again, continuity doesn't really matter.
It was just weird seeing Riddler with a tash.
And then Gorshin came back in the third season. Although if I was Frank Gorshin, I'd have taken my bat and ball home and been like, no. I'm not doing it again. If you recast me, why don't you go and get your Gomez Adams? He can fucking do it. But Frank Gorshin was better than that, or he wanted a paycheck. So he did come back in the third season.
Yes, he did. Yes.
And then also we've got to mention Cesar Romero with his joke of "Ooh, yes." And what I love about it was he was a Spanish singer, sort of like Latin lover type thing, like a bit like Julio Iglesias or something like that.
But the thing is, though, I noticed that during the second of the trilogy Batman films, the recent ones, that Heath Ledger actually copied the laugh of Cesar Romero in a couple of scenes, and the actual laugh that he did in that was a pretty good copy of the way Cesar Romero used to do it. So it obviously looked at the old series to to try and channel the Joker in certain ways, and that laugh was as a result of it.
But Heath Ledger didn't have any facial hair, because that was the thing that I always remember about Cesar Romero.
His signature moustache.
His moustache, which he refused to shave off because it was such a part of who he was, out of the of Batman, and so he would always, and you can see. But then again, if you're watching on a black and white portable television in those days, we laugh now, but you probably wouldn't have seen it.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. It's only now when we're watching it, in high def, that you can see. Oh, look, there's his moustache.
So anyway, let's move on to the films.
Yes.
I was really lucky. I actually watched the first Tim Burton Batman film in the cinema. And I actually watched it because it was Tim Burton. I think he'd done Edward Scissorhands previously. I think that was his first big break film.
No, when we're talking 1980...
89 was Batman.
89, so...
I think Edward Scissorhands was
in the Gap,
wasn't it?
No, it was in the Gap.
Oh, what did he do before? I know he did
Beetlejuice.
Beetlejuice. That was it. It was Beetlejuice. Sorry, I apologise. It was Beetlejuice. So it was his second.
Yeah.
Well, no, he also did the one before it, which was the character with the slit black hair, the kiddish character.
Frankenweenie.
No.
No.
It was.
Peabody.
Pee-wee
Herman.
Sorry.
Yeah,
all right.
Pee-wee Herman. Yeah, he did that one, and then he did.
Well, you should chip in more then, Scott.
And then he was brought on to do Batman. So I actually watched it off the back of Tim Burton. The thing is though about that first film is, even though it was very enjoyable, and I think that Jack Nicholson made a fantastic Joker. It was a bit of a mess, the first film, in styles. It was that sort of mishmash between 50s sort of news reporter looks, with the long coats and the hats, with 80s punk style and yuppies, and it was just this huge mix that didn't quite gel well. And I think it made a film that didn't have an identity, and it certainly wasn't a Tim Burton film. You watch it, and there was only really about 2 shots throughout the entire film that you could say that was Tim Burton who did this film. And because I'm quite familiar with his work, you can really see that in it. It's still a good film. It's there's some fantastic lines came out of it, and I'm really pleased that they made a conscious decision to pull Batman back into that dark style, the way that it was originally intended in the Bob Kane comics rather than the 60s series. But I just wish it would have been more Tim Burton, or he had had a little bit more input in it. And I do know that he was constrained by the producers at the time on that first film to not actually put in his full attention to what he would normally do. And there was a lot of rewrites throughout the whole of the filming, including the end scene.
I would argue that it does have an identity. It just doesn't have an identity as a Tim Burton film, perhaps. I mean, I actually think that's probably makes it a better Batman film than Batman Returns. Because there are certain Tim Burton isms that aren't necessarily part what one would consider to be Batman. Does that make sense? Like I think so. I actually think it's probably a little bit more faithful to the comics.
It is more faithful to the comics, yeah. But as someone who's expecting to go and see a Tim Burton film, I was actually disappointed at first.
Right.
I was disappointed, and it's only on rewatching it that I've actually seen, some great characterizations came out of it. But it to me it was a little bit of a mess of a film. It didn't flow as well as it could have done. And I actually I know you're a huge fan of Prince, but I actually really think that the Prince bit just puts me off the whole, a lot of the things in there.
That's what makes it brilliant. I mean, and I love how I was going to talk a little bit about this, but I love how Prince's songs were actually utilised in the movie, like because there is sort of the Joker going through Gotham on a big float. He would have had, he would have had some kind of pop music over it or whatever, because it was a party and he does it. And what I love about, and this will mean nothing to you guys, but when Jack Nicholson filmed that actually on the lot at Pinewood, it was 1999 that was playing. So they actually had temporary Prince tracks, and also the museum scene where they were trashing it. They actually played Prince music, and then Prince did songs that sort of fit the need, and then they were replaced in the movie with new songs off the soundtrack. But it was supposedly it was Jack Nicholson and his presence, because in the movie that made Prince agree to do it. One of the producers, Mark Canton, his previous big hit up to that point was Purple Rain. And he was like, well, what have we got? How can we sort of tie in other aspects? Because that film was probably the first of those big merchandising movies, and it sort of tapped in. So you've got like toy licenses. Who have we got on Warner Brothers Records? We've got Prince. It covered all bases, and it was probably
Didn't Prince release the album with the Batman symbol on?
Yeah,
I'm sure he did it.
Yeah, well, that was actually how I got into Prince. Because became a proper Prince fan. Was because I asked for Christmas for someone for the Danny Elfman soundtrack, and I got the Prince soundtrack instead.
What a letdown!
No, at first I was like, "What is this?" And then also what I love about it. So Prince, imagine Prince being on he went to Pinewood Studios and met in the Batcave, met Tim Burton, and that was also where he met Kim Basinger, who he ended up having a little bit of a fling with. Yeah. And there's a song which is over the end credits, which is supposed to be Bruce's his love theme. If you read the liner notes, it's got Bruce. It says it's written in script, so like Party Man, the song, which is when they're trashing the museum. It says Joker. This is the Joker singing it, and then it says on Scandalous, which is the one that's over the end credits. It's Bruce's love theme, but they did an extended version of that where he took Kim Basinger to Paisley Park, which is his recording complex, and apparently they got honey on the sound desk, because that's Kim Basinger's got her favourite food is honey, and there was lots of it being poured in certain places all over.
See, I'm just trying to imagine a 5'11" Kim Basinger with a 2'6" Prince. It's just really doesn't seem to fit, to be honest with you.
Oh no, he's a sexy motherfucker. He knows what he's doing.
He's only 2'1".
Doesn't matter.
I'll go down in size if you want, because he is very small. I have seen him. I have met him. Unfortunately, I mean, I'm not really a big fan of his. But I have actually met him, and I'm not tall, but he's touching.
I can't.
So small.
I'm sorry to take this podcast off on a tangent, but you've met Prince. You choose to tell me that now.
Sorry.
When did you meet him?
In Manchester.
When?
I can't remember. It was ages ago.
And how did you meet him? I mean, it's not like he's like going to be.
No. I think he was on at the MEN.
Yes.
Right. And. Yeah, I didn't go to watch him because I don't like him. He was on at the MEN, and he was doing something round the back gates.
Right.
And because I lived in Salford and I had to walk through that way to get to Manchester, there was a lot of fans around and all this and the other, and he kind of come out to the gates to greet them, which was a thing that he did back in the early 90s before I think it was when he became Symbol, actually. Maybe, I'm not sure. But anyway, I kind of walked past and turned and saw him and went, shit, you're small. So, yeah.
He's damn funky. I've seen him live, but I've not been that close to the man himself.
Right, yeah.
But we'll, yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. But anyway, back to the film.
Yeah, this town needs an enema.
Yes. I mean, I've given a name to my pain, it's Batman. Right, anyway.
I have a mind to make some movies. Phone book.
Do you dance with the devil in the pale moonlight?
Gentlemen, let's broaden our minds. Lawrence?
Do you know, there's a bit in that film that I never understand, even to this day. Like, the end scene that's in the bell tower, right?
Yeah.
And Joker goes there it's not purposely. It's kind of like he goes there because it's the tallest building and he needs to get the helicopter. So he heads in that direction because he's just shot down Batman's bat flying mobile thing. Yeah. And he goes in there, Batman follows him in, goes up the stairs, and suddenly there's Joker's minions up at the top in the bell tower that fight Batman. And I'm like, how the fuck did they get there? Why are they there in the first place? What is the reason for them being there? You know, and they didn't go in at any point. And that was the one thing that really confused me about that film. And I've realised now, because they actually rewrote the ending, because even at that point, Jack Nicholson was saying to Tim Burton, why am I going up these stairs?
Yeah.
Because they didn't know the ending at that point, so it was being rewritten constantly. And I do think that's a huge, massive gaping error in the
Because I think on one of the special features, they went to see John Peters. One of the producers went to see Phantom of the Opera while they were shooting in London. And at the end of that, the Phantom takes Christine and he drags her down to his lair. And he saw that and said, "We need that." So rather than dragging Vicky down, they drag her up.
Yeah,
but it's the
same.
But
it wasn't his lair though. That's the thing, and he never.
Yeah,
you know, it was very confusing at that point.
Yeah, I guess visually stunning and impressive.
Yeah, and he got Batman to shoot out his little wrist gadget and whack that guy in the bollocks.
Yeah, and I love the kind of the humanity of like sort of Michael Keaton looks proper shagged out by that point. Like he's going up the stairs and he's stumbling around or whatever.
Mind you, he had just crashed.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And but I love the fact that he's like, you know, he's soldier.
Yeah, and he hits the all the pews and they all tip over, and I do enjoy that bit. I must admit.
Yeah, I've come to. It's not the plot, you know, doesn't hold up to massive scrutiny, but as long as it does everything else well, then I don't really mind that much.
Yeah, it's fair enough. I mean, the thing. I mean, I'll still go back to this sort of like mixture of things that always confuse me about this film, because I know it was trying hard to be more like that sort of 50s noir look about it, and they really tried to do that so much with the costumes and the characters. But I still found it a little bit confusing when they introduced the yuppies and they introduced the 80s punks and the pop music. That's the bit that the identity side of it that I always found. I've just
sort of always seen it as Gotham just is its own world. I
just think the second one was a lot more moulded together, and
even in the comics, and they do it in the animated series as well. It's sort of like you've got Batman's extreme technology. You know, up against the sort of, the backward dated fashion styles of, and the black and white TVs or whatever. And it never really bothered me that much.
It bothered me. I've got to be bothered by something with a film.
Fair enough.
I can never have a perfect film, unfortunately.
So Scott, weigh in Batman '89. What have you got to say about it?
I agree with everything you guys have just said. There we go.
Yay! Shall we go into Batman Returns then?
Batman Returns.
I actually really enjoyed the film. Because I was a big Tim Burton fan, and I still am a Tim Burton fan. Batman Returns was a Tim Burton film. He essentially produced it, he directed it, he had a part in the writing of it, and it was much more moulded to the way Tim Burton does a film. It was more gothic. The style of it was a lot more. They had the identity there, so everybody was dressed in the right period clothing to whatever the period that it was set in. The buildings had much more uniformity to them. It was even the storyline was so much better as well. There was a lot more going on in that film, and visually it looked stronger than the first film. And it was probably because it was an extra like 40 million on top of it to actually make this film. The downside to it, and I always find downsides to films, is that it was such a shame that they took it away from England. The first film was filmed at Pinewood, and it was because of getting Michael Keaton back into the Batman role that they moved it back over to California. And I know there was a lot of people pissed off at the time about that.
That was the carrot, really. That was Michael Keaton's carrot, and Tim Burton's carrot was, if you want to come back, he was like, I think I've said all I need to say on Batman. So they said to him, well, look, Tim. So rather than make a Batman movie, why don't you make a Tim Burton movie?
Yes.
And that's what they did. So he made I guess, he read up on the Penguin or something, but he configured the Penguin
into his own
style. Because, like you said, I don't think he had any major contribution to like the script and the structure.
No, he did on the
storyline. But the idea
ideas,
of the Penguin being this bird thing, that was him, because I believe that he drew a picture, and again this is on the special edition DVD. Drew a picture of like, my name is Timmy, and they call me the hideous bird boy or something like that, and it's this Tim Burton piece of art, and he's outside, and it's this little boy with flippers that's outside a circus tent, and that was like his concept art for it, because I believe he does that for a lot of his films. And if you look at the origin of Catwoman, she's not just a jewel thief.
He changed the character, which in some ways I didn't actually mind in this one, because even though I knew a little bit about the history of the characters, I didn't mind too much.
It's one of those when, if it's done well, it's not as big a deal. It's like, it's when you do things arbitrarily because you're making another. Making a movie and you want to put your own stamp on it.
I mean, this was done well to me.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I think it is, and as on a personal level, it's actually one of my favourites of all of the Batman films.
Right.
And I mean, there are always, as usual, confusing points within the films that I can never understand why and why this is happening. Essentially, the Michelle Pfeiffer part where she's actually making a costume out of a leather jacket, a whole costume that covers the whole of her body, out of a leather jacket, overnight, on a, stitching it up by hand and cutting it herself. But she's a secretary. And it's like, how can this woman make this perfect hugging body costume while she's just had a fall out of a window, and she's deranged and hurt and damaged, and she makes this perfect costume that makes her look like a sex goddess.
It is very Frankenstein-esque, the costume, where it's all patched up.
Well, I think that's sort of the Tim Burton element there, that kind of logic leap. If we were to compare sort of Tim Burton with the Chris Nolan, I imagine Chris Nolan has sleepless nights when he can't figure out some aspect of the plot and how he motivates it from A to B, whereas Tim Burton's is just sort of like, just go with it, just do it well, and it'll all work out.
Do you know my all-time favourite scene in Batman Returns? When the Penguin comes up from, I think it's one of
You didn't invite me, so I crashed!
It's when she's lying on the bed.
Oh.
Michelle Pfeiffer is lying on the bed in the Catwoman costume, and all you see is the curve of her ass shining in the black leather.
Oh, I was getting it mixed up.
I did like Michelle Pfeiffer. I still do like Michelle Pfeiffer, actually. She is one of my many lists of...
Lusts, your list of
my
lusts.
List of lust. And in that Catwoman costume, it was an absolutely, perfect parts of it. But the other thing about the film that I enjoyed so much was that they consciously made it around about Christmas time. So they had that snow and the colourful tree and everything about it. And it really fitted in so well to the dark, gothic, noir sort of look that he was going for. To have this the white, the white snow-covered sets, and it was just beautiful. I thought the film really did show Batman in a good light, and I think Batman Returns is the reason why the franchise continued. Batman was good; it made quite a lot of money. I know Batman Returns made so much more, and
no, it didn't.
I thought it did.
No, it didn't. It didn't actually. It made less, and that was.
Or maybe it was critically better. Received
possibly.
As far as I remember.
Amongst Bat fans, it splits people. I guess it depends on your Tim Burton mileage, but there's a guy who runs a website called Batman on Film, and he's quite connected, and he really doesn't like Batman Returns because he just doesn't think it's a Batman film. Bruce is in the shadows. I've just recalled something many years ago that I wrote, and I've just and it's just come back to me. I remember writing a review of Batman Returns, and I actually thought that theory is wrong, that it's not a Batman film, that actually Batman is in every pore of that film.
Yes, yeah.
If you look at the three villains, they're all reflections of what Bruce could be if he let himself go in a certain direction.
Yes.
You've got Catwoman, who's the part of Bruce that gets off on it, who likes the cool toys.
Yes.
It's the part of Bruce that makes the Batmobile and then just enjoys being a badass.
Mm.
You've got the Beast, which is the Penguin. You've got that sort of elemental, that version of that part of Bruce that is just full of rage and hatred and just wants to punch the lights out of every kind of crook or whatever, and want that kind of unkempt version of Batman that if he just let himself go completely into the shadows. And then you've got Max Schreck, who is the
anti-businessman.
The businessman, and what Bruce could be if he let he could be a slime ball in the boardroom, but instead he's got Batman. So it's like they're sort of three reflections of the Batman character, and while he might not say much, and Michael Keaton is one of the only actors to give himself less dialogue, because he would always sort of look at the script and be like, I don't need to say that, I'll just do it with a look.
Yeah.
And by that point he'd really, I think it was the writer, I forget his name, Daniel Waters on this one, who said something along those lines, that Michael Keaton would rewrite the script and just be like, no, don't need to do that.
Yeah, it's Daniel Waters. Yeah, I can just see now. It's just behind that 2 minutes 24 seconds to power off sign. Yeah, Daniel Waters delivered the script that satisfied Burton.
And then it was the other co-writer was Sam Hamm, who worked on.
Oh, and Wesley Strick did an uncredited rewrite as well, apparently. Well, he deleted the characterisations of Harvey Dent and Robin, because Robin was originally intended to be in Batman Returns.
Originally, yeah.
Marlon Wayans.
Yeah, we should. Yeah, I've forgotten about that. But yeah, Robin.
Do you know what? Actually, we'll go back just very briefly to this. What surprised me about the first Batman film is the character of Harvey Dent in it, and there was not a single mention of what he was going to become, and it was as if the character was there without anybody. I mean, I think it was there as a reference for a fan to go, "That's Harvey Dent" before, but there was no follow up to it. There was nothing at that point that followed it up. And
yeah, I don't know whether, because Tim Burton seems quite keen on making individual movies and not particularly thinking about the bigger picture.
Yeah, when he did Returns, he didn't go back to the
Billy D. Williams, in fact, Batman Forever, one of the reasons it's such an expensive movie is the number of actors they had to pay off, because Billy D. Williams was contracted to be in Batman Forever.
Right.
Or he got a multi-picture deal, so it didn't matter that he wasn't in Batman Returns. He got paid for it or something, or paid some kind of whatever, because they got an option on him, and then they paid him off when they cast Tommy Lee Jones, and the same with Marlon Wayans. Like he was like, so when Joel Schumacher inherited the film, he got these 2 bits of Tim Burton, 3 bits, 4 bits. 5.
Yeah, but Tim Burton was still actually a producer on the third one anyway, so
in name only.
Yeah, no, he did have quite a bit of work on it as well. I mean, Joel Schumacher didn't have full control of the Batman Forever that he did with Batman and Robin.
Isn't that just us? Yeah, isn't that just sort of retroactively trying to?
No. That was something I'd read. That was something I'd actually read at the time, because there was promotional material released at the times that each of the films was released, and I do actually remember reading that Tim Burton, even though he took a step back, his producer's role was still there, and he still did. He still had an input into the film to a certain extent. He didn't have full control, but Joel Schumacher then went on to have full control in the fourth one, which was,
I'd heard the opposite, that he wasn't really that involved, and it was more just to appease people and to sort of suggest he was still part of the fold, and to make it look like they hadn't sacked him. They didn't sack him, but he went into sort of with some ideas apparently to a meeting with what they could do with a third one, and because Batman Returns hadn't met the kind of box office expectations, probably because it was a Christmas movie released in the summer, the themes were so dark, yet they needed
have Prince in it.
They didn't. Well, exactly. Like they needed to, and they needed to market it as well to children. and there were like tie-ins with Batman with McDonald's and stuff, Happy Meal toys, and parents were complaining because the kids actually couldn't go and see the film anyway, and they shouldn't. It was a grown-up film that they were making toys for, so. That all contributed to him not being asked back, and
but
he got halfway through the meeting, and was like, "Wouldn't you?" And one of the executives said to him, "Wouldn't you like to, make your own film now, make a Tim Burton film?" And he took that as like, "You really don't want me to do this."
But he still had quite a good part in the producer's side of it.
Okay.
Yes. Anyway, Scott, what did you think about Batman Returns? I mean. Don't say what you said.
What you said. Batman Returns was one of the first movies that I actually saw out of the Batman films themselves, because there was only 2 at the time. And I really enjoyed it. I loved the character of the Penguin. I loved the character of Catwoman. It was... That's about it.
Okay.
Plain simple. I never looked at it from any other point other than just watching the characters, and they were brilliant. I enjoyed them. And then going back to what you were saying about the original Batman not feeling like Tim Burton, you got to take into account the Pee Wee Herman and Beetlejuice were the only 2 films previous to that, as though it was basically Tim Burton starting up, trying to find a style.
Beetlejuice really was Tim Burton,
and
that's when he'd started. And the way I see it is that he wasn't given the full control that he wanted on Batman. That's the way I see it.
They would never have allowed it anyways. Beetlejuice was one of his own creations. Batman wasn't. It was like with Sam Raimi and Spider-Man, basically. You saw Sam Raimi had more reins with the second film, like Tim Burton did with Batman Returns, but still had.
And also, he's being a little bit more reverent, I think, to the source material in the first film. The second one was very much like, you can you do what you want here. So that. But I think on the first one, he was trying. There was part of him that was actually trying to service the Batman character, and he was a little bit more ensconced in it. He'd read Frank Miller and gone back to the original Bob Kane stuff. So if we moving on, just back going back to sort of like the inheriting characters. So Joel Schumacher, as I understand it, when he took on the film, he got Michael Keaton, Michael Gough.
Yes.
He got Pat Hingle as Commissioner Gordon, and he got Billy D. Williams and Marlon Wayans.
Yes.
Marlon Wayans was supposed to be in Batman Returns, and that was a studio suggestion, and the film was getting a little bit cluttered, and the first, as far as Tim Burton was concerned, who did, cast Marlon Wayans, but I believe that Robin was going to be like a mechanic. So, when the Batmobile gets smashed up because the Penguin takes over, he was going to take it, and Michael Gough says we can't take it to any old Joe's body shop. Yeah. That was where it was going to. That was where the mechanic was going to figure into it, and possibly was going to take on the Robin identity, something along those lines. That's what Joel Schumacher had got.
And I know Keaton left because he didn't like the direction that the new film was going. Had he read the script or something?
I believe they had.
He didn't like how it was going.
I believe they had a meeting, and I'd love to take credit for this story, but I think I read it on a forum, but I've just passed it off as my own for years now. I believe they went for a meeting, and Joel Schumacher was like, so I've got some ideas, about what we can do, with the Batman character. There's some big sweeping changes, and Michael Keaton's like, oh, so what, you want to make it darker? You want to explore his psyche a little bit more? And then Joel Schumacher just goes, no, nipples, silly. And that's what I like to think the movie was like. Michael Keaton bowed out very quickly, and I think it was a case of Joel Schumacher not having cast, because that's always the thing with the director inheriting. If you've not cast those parts, so if you're a director and you're told to come on board, on a new James Bond film or something like that, if somebody says, oh, by the way, you've not got Daniel Craig, there'll always be a part of you that's a little bit pleased about that, because it means you get to cast your own, and every director thinks they know best and likes to put their stamp on it. So I imagine it was a case of Michael Keaton's out. Should we try to offer him more? And he just said no, because I reckon Val Kilmer, the guy from Top Gun, could do it just as well.
I mean, I actually enjoyed Batman Forever to a certain extent. I know it was lighter than the Tim Burton ones, but it was also it was a very colourful film and very well written to a certain point. I like the characterisations in it. I love the character of the Riddler in that film. I think Jim Carrey actually does quite a good job.
Yeah.
And I do like the scene where he's throwing the little bombs, the little wind-up bombs, and he throws one under his leg across, and he blows up the Batcave. And I think that is a wonderful little scene.
Very Gaussian influence.
It is a very Gaussian influence, and I did enjoy that one quite
Intruder alert! Intruder alert! Shut up! Joy gets
I did enjoy Tommy Lee's version of Two-Face as well, to a certain extent. It wasn't Tommy Lee at his best, but it was quite a nice...
Do you know what I mean? I don't mind it. I don't mind it as a villain. If it was like No Face from the 60s Batman, with the Two-Face knockoff, I think just that character, especially in the 90s, in the animated series, had so much wonderful development and psychological analysis. Similar to, I guess, again, if they'd have done what they'd done with Catwoman in Batman Returns and just giving him a little bit more, a little bit more psychological makeup. I mean, I'm sure Tommy Lee Jones could have delivered that performance. It just wasn't what he was asked for.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a bad, big villain. He's certainly not unpleasant to watch on screen, but I think it could have been so much better, and they could have explored that character.
I think the makeup was quite poor in it as well. It really wasn't. I mean, obviously they couldn't have done any worse because of the rating they were aiming for.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, excuse me. They were aiming for more of a children's film anyway.
Yeah.
So they couldn't have had a burned face or a scarred face. They had to do it up a little bit.
Yeah. I guess it's that thing of sort of trying to strike the balance between it's got to look dramatic, so this guy couldn't walk down the street. On the other hand, dramatic and significant, but on the other hand, it can't be too scary. So they came up with that sort of pink thing that's going on with him.
That sums up the movie. This pink thing.
Yeah. I mean, talking about the palette and the colours. If you look at the different styles of the Batman films, I think you've got. The first one is definitely the 30s.
Yes.
The second one is, I would say, the 90s, the late 80s, 90s, and that kind of storytelling they were doing in the comics. The third one, I would say, is sort of 50s and very kind of Dick Sprang.
Yeah.
Very kind of lots of
green.
Large sets, green.
Green in it, yeah.
It's still Denny O'Neill was sort of the right where the character at the centre of it. Batman would be dark, but his world and his villains would be lighter. And then the fourth one is the 60s.
Yeah.
And not just the 60s on screen, but also the 60s on the page.
Camp.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I just, before we ask Scott about Batman Forever? Actually, no, Scott, Batman Forever.
Batman Forever was an appalling film. Tommy Lee Jones was absolutely shocking. Jim Carrey, Jesus Christ.
Was he Jesus Christ?
Yeah, he was.
Right.
Val Kilmer. The one fascinating thing that I know about this film is that Joel Schumacher had that many problems with Val Kilmer that after the final scene he just said, "Get this bastard off my set," and which rightfully so. He played a bad Batman. George Clooney. I still try and sometimes weigh up if George Clooney was that little bit better, but even George Clooney had the audacity to say in an article, I can't remember if it was Empire or Total Film, stating that he knew that he was not going to be a good Batman, and you just think to yourself, as an actor, you shouldn't say shit like that.
I admire the candour, because I mean, you can't knock him for taking the role like where he was in his career.
Yeah, but you don't take on a role and then say to an audience, "Yeah, I think I did it poorly."
Yeah, but when we're talking immediately afterwards or years later, I mean, because everybody knows, when you're promoting a film, you don't always talk up. I mean, He didn't say that in interviews promoting the film at the time.
Oh no, he wouldn't have done.
I mean, I do remember him in a press kit saying, "It's Keaton's role, and I'm just filling his shoes or something along those lines."
But the thing is, though, I always remember watching an interview much later on regarding George Clooney coming in as the replacement for Val Kilmer, whether it was done because they wanted to make it a happier set or a happier place. Joel Schumacher was saying, I wanted Val Kilmer to carry on with the role, but there was a problem with his PA or something like that, and Val Kilmer saying, I wanted to carry on with the role, but my PA didn't really want me to carry on with it. They wanted me to go into other things. And it was an interview that was done on one of the DVDs about it, that both of them kind of wanted each other to be on the film, but it was an external force that was stopping it. Now, whether that was done to appease the audience, to make the audience feel happy about Val Kilmer not being in Batman and Robin, I don't know, but I'm believing your story.
It was actually
that it was a complete nutter tip.
It was a scheduling conflict. You've got to take into account The Saint came out in 1997, I think, if I remember correctly, which was Val Kilmer, but he'd already been signed up with that, and due to a scheduling conflict, they had to get somebody else.
Well, the version of the story I like to believe, just because it's the most interesting and exciting, is that I believe that he was like physically he was really difficult to direct on the set. Like, he wouldn't take direction very well, and it was like he didn't want to be there. And I've heard that he was physically attacked Joel Schumacher, like at one point slammed him against the wall in his trailer and told him to stop giving him nonsensical direction or something along those lines. I can't remember the specifics of it, but so there are various stories. I get the impression that it wasn't a harmonious set. And
I think the video that I watched was definitely trying to appease the audience. Then.
Yeah, and I think, and I mean, of course, in the immediate aftermath, you don't want to kind of like you want it to sound like George Clooney. His coming in happened under the most harmonious of circumstances, because nobody wants to kind of inherit a role that happened, inherit a franchise that's in a bad state like that. So, my favourite story about Clooney's casting is that he's from Dusk Till Dawn. Joel Schumacher saw a one-page ad in a newspaper, and he drew on a cowl because he thought, he's got the right chin for it, and that was how he got the role.
It's just a shame he was so shit. Because Batman and Robin, I've made a very simple note about Batman and Robin, because I did a marathon. I watched every single film.
Yeah.
And I just put, oh shit.
Yes.
It looked great. The film looked great. It looked spectacular. The sets were amazing in it.
Although the homoeroticized Greek. I mean,
I was thinking more along the lines of Poison Ivy's butt.
Right.
The film was just so terrible. I really hated it.
I don't mind the Art Deco, and I don't mind the sort of the. It just seems like there was a lot of fetishizing the male form in terms of the architecture of Gotham.
Even Batgirl's nipples were smaller than Batman's and Robin's nipples, and I'm really annoyed at that, because that would have made the film so much better. What was the name who played?
Alicia Silverstone.
Oh yeah. See, I never got into it. I could never see any sort of worth in.
Just because I paid money for the DVD and I like to find worth in everything.
Well, I got it in the box set. You see,
I'll point out the scenes with Alfred and Bruce, where I think he says, "I love you, old man." I think that's quite good. I like those scenes between Michael Gough and George Clooney.
I like that. He comes up with what is you're hoping to be something really nice and poetic, and then you say that.
What?
One of the most boringest, crappiest scenes, where you feel like it's supposed to be a tearjerker moment, and you just think to yourself, the rest of the film is piss poor. It. I don't give a shit, Alfred. Just fucking die.
I must admit, though, I must admit that Dr. Freeze's wife was fucking gorgeous in that water.
Bloody Bloody
the way that her hair floated in the water, and you could just Anyway.
And then there's a bit where he has a flashback and sees out the window and sees Alfred helping him put flowers on his parents' graveside. I like it.
Yeah, but
I think Clooney's...
that bit just does not fit into that fucking film.
I didn't say he did. I was just saying the bit I found, and I also would say Clooney is the best public persona Bruce Wayne.
The
scenes where he's at the press conference and he's schmoozing. There's just something about Clooney and his natural chemistry.
I can't stand George Clooney.
That works.
The only film that I liked George Clooney was in was the one that you just mentioned before. Dust to Dawn. Yeah. And that's only because it was But that's the only thing that I ever really liked him in.
I really love the Clooney.
Yeah. Batman Begins. Hey, we should go on to the new series anyway now.
Okay.
I mean, it was a complete and utter redo. It was still done by Warner Brothers. They still wanted to continue on through the Warner Brothers series, but it just completely redid it right from the beginning. And at first it jarred a little bit for me, only because I did this marathon of watching all of the films. So it had a little bit of a jarring moment where I watched Batman and Robin, followed by Batman Begins, and I was like, oh yeah. But I mean, Batman Begins was possibly to me at that point, when I very first saw it, the best of the Batman films. At that point, it showed Batman as he grew up in his character, how he became Batman. I still love that little scene when he's asking Lucius Fox about some certain kit, and it's about spelunking. And he, as he says to him, like, is it too expensive for the army? And Lucius Fox says, I don't think they tried to market it to the billionaire spelunking base jumping crowd. I thought that was absolutely fantastic. But the film really was a strong entry into the series, and I did enjoy it a lot. It was long, but it was a very good film.
What was really nice about it is that they got away from that fantastical element. It was about bringing the possibility of Batman as a realistic hero, and it wasn't just that as well. It's taking that kind of, again, fantastical element with the villains. Basically, they didn't necessarily go through the same metamorphic changes that they did either in the comic books, the cartoons, or the Tim Burton to Joel Schumacher era. And I think Christopher Nolan did.
Well, I think that was more about doing it for Batman, wasn't it, rather than for doing it for the villains. Showing the growth of Batman, rather. Yeah, and that.
But at the same time, though, it gave you this possibility of plausibility that this could actually happen, to a certain extent. Of apart from obviously some of the gadgets in the last of the trilogy of Christopher Nolan, but in the first two,
but
certainly,
arguably it earned those gadgets. I mean, I think watching the third one, you can see there are certain concessions, like there are certain extremes that it's gone to that wouldn't fly in Batman Begins, but because it's gone over this sort of arc, I think it's allowed to get it's earned the right to get bigger and bigger, and
we're
still
supposed
not
to be 8 years in the future.
Yeah, and still not be not be deemed camp or going off. I think what struck me about it is. I've only realised this to begin with. It did feel really sort of stripped down. Like if you look at the arc, I've always liked Batman being slightly operatic. I love the skyline of the first Tim Burton film, which is like the World's Fair was just allowed to carry on, or the New York Planning Commission, didn't have any restrictions, and the skyline gets more and more cluttered. It's a little bit more sort of fantastical, not necessarily camp, but it's not. It's in a slightly removed reality. Chris Nolan's, originally it felt a little bland.
But I found Gotham City in the first Batman Begins film as being a little bit more fantastical than where he went in future ones.
Right.
There was that little bit more about it, the railway that swept over the top of the city.
The monorail.
The monorail, and various other parts of it did feel a little bit more fantastical than any future entries that he did in the series, which then look more realistic.
It's taken me a while to work out what he was doing with it, because I remember being a little bit perturbed, because there was a lot of location filming in all three, but of it being in Chicago. And using a real skyline, and there were very
filmed
few.
A little bit of the first film in Liverpool.
Yeah,
I think it was the docks scene, as far as I can remember.
Most city street level stuff is Chicago. Interiors, etc. Pinewood, or filmed in the UK, and then there was some location work in where they internationally, when they've been abroad in a couple of others. What I was saying was I found it jarring to begin with, but I realised what he was doing, and it was all part of sort of entrenching it into this real
quite
world.
Similar in that sense, because I found it quite jarring at first, but the
missed
film,
the gargoyles.
I did actually get into it.
I missed gargoyles.
You missed the big statues with the huge arses.
Yes, that's right.
And you missed the nipples on the bat suit.
And the score as well. Like, I've really warmed to, especially in the third one. Like, there's a moment like when the bat takes off a rooftop and it finally goes into the dun 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 dun. But it's that really kind of percussive. It's not no melody, and it took me a while to work out that it's this kind of ambient thing that Hans Zimmer's going for. But in the first one, I found the score to be quite bland. I was like, I want trumpets, I want Danny Elfman, and it's not there. So, a bold experiment,
and it did continue on in The Dark Knight at the same time. The bold experimentation. It continued to. He changed the rules quite a bit in the second film, where he did very similar to what Tim Burton did in the first film, where he took the Batman character away from them as not being the main character, and the introduction of the Joker being the main character. I would say Heath Ledger probably had more to say in that film than Batman did, and sometimes it actually mirrors that very first Batman film, but it's more. And even the seriousness of it as well, the political side of it, mirrors the very first Batman film in some ways. I just like how he made it more realistic, the way that he'd done the second one. I did feel, unfortunately, that there was a little bit of a loss on the Heath Ledger character, that we didn't really find out where he was from. We didn't find out who he was.
No, but that's what I loved about it.
No, I liked it to a certain point. But I just wished, in the back of my mind, that he may have found out something about it. Just something. They kept saying, we don't know where he's from, we don't know who he is, we don't know, there's no fingerprint records, nothing.
Yeah, but at the same time though, he goes on about how he got his smile, and then the second time he tells a story, he tells a whole different story. Yeah. And what's really nice about that is there's a possible suggestion that is he just fabricating stories because he did it towards himself, or was it some form of trauma that resulted in this disfiguration?
Yeah.
But what was really nice about it was you didn't need to know the actual backstory to the Joker. He was there, he was nasty, he was vicious, he was mean.
I would like to have known something though. Just a little hint, just something. But that's just me. I mean, that's just me trying to find something in a film.
Going on more about Heath Ledger, where we're kind of stepping to one side about the reintroduction of Two-Face again with Aaron Eckhart.
Yeah.
The makeup on that was pretty super. Well, it wasn't makeup actually; it was CG.
They did quite a good job of hiding that, if memory serves.
They did pretty damn well for it.
It was one of these, and it's happened recently with something in the new Bond film, which. I'm not going to spoil.
No, you're not.
I'm not going to spoil. Where a certain piece of information came out, like that Two-Face, Harvey Dent was in this movie, so therefore Two-Face must be. And then I think they managed to backtrack quite well on it. I'm pretty sure that I went into The Dark Knight thinking that it was more than likely he was only going to get deformed at the end, and it was going to set up for the third one. I was like sure that Two-Face was going to be in the third one, but I didn't see that he was going to be as prominent a figure.
Yeah.
Like, or that maybe even Harvey Dent might not have even had the. And I think they did a good job, because I remember thinking Two-Face is in it, and then reading all the interviews with Aaron Eckhart and thinking, oh, he's not actually going to be Two-Face in this one. It's a future thread that's been set up. So
well, the thing is, though, with The Dark Knight, it was such a long film. I mean, it had about 5 different endings.
Yeah.
There was a point when even my wife watched it. She enjoyed the film, but there was a certain point when she went, "Oh, it's finished now." No, we've still got another 40 minutes left.
Yeah.
And then she's going, what? She couldn't believe that it was just. It
works better.
And I think that's why
I remember actually coming out of it and saying, I saw it, I think, on opening night, and I came out of it and was like, that's a bum number, and I really did feel.
Well, I actually came out of it going, I want to pee.
Yeah. I felt it was too long, and then I actually yeah, I felt too long, and I actually wanted it to be shorter. Now when I've rewatched it on DVD, and I've been able to take a break or watch it at my own pace and go for a pee, and I've enjoyed it a lot more. But I did think that the stuff with the boat, it's really well played stuff. But I think that maybe there's just too much going on there, and we'd already set up the kind of anarchy of the Joker, and we didn't need that. But I also understand why that scene's there, because it wants to put a face on the chaos that Gotham's causing. It's all right for the Commissioner to be talking about how bad it is, but showing it, but too long.
I mean, I unfortunately I felt that about The Dark Knight Rises. I felt that was too long. I mean, I know you enjoyed it. I found it the poorest out of the 3 films. I did do, and I think it was because of the lack of
Prince.
the Prince. Yeah, it was the lack of Prince. I think it was the lack of colour of the villain. Bane was. I know he was the everyman. He was supposed to have been just that person on the street that says, "Let's rise up against the authority system and all this and the other." But he was a very boring character to me, unfortunately. I know they tried to introduce a lot of the backstory to him and this and the other. But I found that The Dark Knight Rises was possibly the least colourful of all of the series, including, dating back to the early ones all the way through. And I'd watched them in order to get to this point, and I watched it again, and I did find the film boring in comparison to others. The set pieces were amazing. It looked fantastic in certain scenes. But I just found that the film lacked a lot of what to me is a Batman film, and it wasn't Batman.
Okay.
I just could not see Batman there at all, and it was as if it was a normal action film, an intelligent action film. Don't get me wrong; it wasn't simple by any means. It was very intelligent and very strongly written, but it just wasn't Batman. And I found it very difficult to enjoy as much as I have in previous ones. And I know you're smirking because you think completely different, but that's my opinion. I really didn't enjoy it as much as the previous 2. That's for sure.
Variety is the spice of life. That was my Bane impression.
I can only do that when I've accidentally knocked my bollocks against the corner of the table.
I imagine it would be very painful for you.
I did like the twist in the film, though. The fact that it was Ra's al Ghul's daughter.
Spoilers. We'll put a spoiler tag.
Unfortunately, now
but everybody's seen it by now.
I already had that spoiled for me because I remember when the casting was introduced and they already mentioned that Ra's al Ghul's daughter was going to appear in it.
But that was only at the end. We only found out how.
I knew Talia al Ghul. I probably figured out that she was Talia. I forget the character. Marion Cotillard's. I knew that. I figured Talia. I'd not worked out that in the prison we were flashing back to her and not Bane.
Yeah.
I thought that was really...
It was quite a good twist at the end.
Yeah. I found it to be, of all the, certainly my favourite of the 3 Nolans, and as such a die-hard Batman 1989 fan, I can't believe I'm saying this, but probably...
like it's 1989.
But I probably exceeds and is my favourite of them all. And I thought it was wonderfully wonderfully operatic in a way. Like that was what I was saying before. Like I felt like Nolan had earned it and had built up this world, and it was like this, this city in decay, and like I loved how it pushed everything to sort of extremes, and I think there was just some wonderful moments. Like I thought the scene where you got the police going into the tunnel while you got them singing, and there's no diegetic sound while you got the boy singing the national anthem with his soprano. I just thought that was a wonderfully composed scene.
There were some fantastic scenes. I agree with you. There really were some really good set pieces in the film. It just the whole film, the entire film from start to finish, was just boring.
No,
I think it was.
No,
I think it was. I do prefer the previous two, and it was. I don't know whether it was because I'd watched all three on the same day, and by the time I got to that, I was like, I was tired. But I don't know because I had watched it previously before that anyway. But I'd still got to that point where I did feel it was the weakest of the three. I know critics have said it's the weakest of the three.
He didn't read Film and Empire then, who both rated it 5 stars.
Yeah,
Empire was possibly the only one though.
Mark Commode said his favourite was Batman Begins, because that was the first one that surprised him, but he spoke very highly of this one, and I felt like it flew by. Like I love the fact that, and I know it annoyed people, but I love the fact that Bruce doesn't. It's a film that takes its time. It's almost like indie in its outlook. It's almost like this art house film made on a massive budget, and I love that how you get so much of the psychology of Bruce Wayne, and he doesn't show up in costume until half an hour.
Maybe that's why I felt that it wasn't a Batman film to me.
I like it because when he does appear, and it's got the scene which is a direct quote from the Dark Knight Returns comic book, where you're about to see, you're in for a show tonight, son, or something like that, and then when he finally does pop off the Batpod, and you see him in the cowl, it's like a sort of punch the air moment, and I don't think that would have had the same impact.
But then he gets his head kicked in.
If we'd have been
and his back broken.
Yeah, but not to begin with. He gives it a fair.
At least they were faithful to the books where he broke his back.
Yeah, well,
it was faithful to a certain point.
Yeah, well, it wasn't. It was never adapting Nightfall, which is the comic.
No, I know, but at least they kept that faithful where Bane broke his back. Yeah.
Yeah. I loved. What do we think of Tom Hardy as Bane?
I actually thought he was very good. I just thought at the same time that he wasn't. See, I know this is the end of the trilogy. You see, so to me, they could have brought in a more not colourful character, but a more well-known villain, a villain that everybody knows, to end the series, because we know that this is where it ends. And unfortunately, as he enjoyed Bane to a certain point, the unfortunate realisation that they brought in a very lacklustre Catwoman that wasn't as colourful as she has been shown in the past, which might have made the film better if she had had a little bit more of a role in it. And that's why I didn't enjoy the film much. But I thought Bane on his own was a good character. I just wish they'd have done other things to have made the film
like that.
interesting.
In fact, I would like... I like the fact that he wasn't a villain that had much of his potential.
No, but that could have been the second film to me.
Yeah,
well, I know because this is a trilogy, see, it's the end of the trilogy, it's the last one.
But to me it didn't. The villain matched the importance of it being like they wrote him. They wrote him well, and I'd love to see that done with the new Superman movies. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like they're going to do it with the first one. They're using General Zod as the villain, but I'd love to take a second string villain that you guys have probably never heard of, like Parasite or something, and to make them. It's this thing of like, well, the second string villains, they're only second string. If you write them set to be second string, make them bigger.
I did enjoy though at the end of the day the introduction of the Dick Grayson character.
Yeah.
That really, I did feel as if it could carry on, but with him taking over the Batman role.
Right. I mean, that was certainly within the universe. I don't think. I mean, some people have been like, well, that means Jason Gordon-Levitt's going to take over. No, it doesn't.
No, I didn't mean that. But it was just interesting.
I like it, and I see it sort of as being a metaphor for Chris Nolan passing on the torch of the storytelling, in that, you know, he's saying like, these are your story. These are your stories. In the way Bruce is passing on the torch. He's passing on the torch to the next generation of filmmakers. And to me, that sort of seemed like it was kind of breaking the fourth wall. The other bit, I'd really like. I'd say a standout performance from Michael Caine. Like, I think that scene is so wonderfully played, where he's like, "And one day I'll look up and you'll be there, and you won't." And I'll see you. Yeah. I think that's lovely. And I've heard it suggested, and I don't know, it would be interesting to hear what you guys think of this. Was the shot where that Chris Nolan had got Michael Caine looking up and smiling, and that the studio had him insert the shot of Bruce and Selina. Now, I just wonder what you think of that. Like, whether you think that's plausible.
No, I think it's plausible. I do think he survived it. I do think he was there, and I do think that Selina Kyle was there.
No, do you think it's plausible? It's plausible that in Nolan's original version, it wasn't as clear.
No. Nolan didn't want that ending.
Yeah,
he didn't want that ending. He didn't want that. But looking back at the early scene when he said that I want to see you there, I'll look up and see you there, that could possibly be the only ending to the film.
Yeah,
because of what he'd said earlier on in the film. I know Nolan didn't want it, but as a viewer and seeing that early scene and having that, it did actually bring a little bit of a tear to my eye.
Yeah,
I must admit.
I found parts of it to be sort of really moving. I love the funeral scene with the "Tale of Two Cities" quote being read out. I love the bit where he finally revealed his identity to Commissioner Gordon. I know other people have got issues with, him revealing his identity left, right and centre. And I think the scene on the steps of the courthouse was almost, with Bane, was almost Shakespearean in the way it was almost like he was doing like "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears," and it was like, "You'll take back the streets, it is your city now." I thought there was a film of moments, and maybe that's it. Maybe I've watched it differently.
The film in its own right, it was very good, but as an ending to the trilogy, I didn't think that it ended the trilogy well. If it had been the second one, yes.
Okay. Interesting stuff. Scott, anything to add?
No.
Yay. This has been the longest podcast we've done, apart from the Doctor Who ones, which we split into 3.
Yeah.
So I think we should end.
It needed to be said.
Yes, it needs to be ended on this point, though, I must admit.
So I'm Phil.